Welcome, friends, and step through the gates with me. For tonight we set out on a very different kind of journey, a glamorous, unhurried tour of the most stunning celebrity graves in all of Hollywood. This is not a mournful walk but a celebration, a chance to stroll the manicured lawns and hushed marble halls where the legends of the silver screen have come to rest, and to marvel at the beauty they left behind even in death, the gleaming sarcophagi and mirrors still reflecting pools, the statues and stained glass, the witty epitaphs and the flower-strewn crypts that fans still visit from every corner of the earth. For in Hollywood, glamour does not end at the grave. The same town that turned ordinary people into gods and goddesses of light gave them resting places worthy of the myth, and to walk among these monuments is to walk through the whole dazzling history of the movies, written in bronze and stone. We will visit the grandest of the great star cemeteries together, the lush and legendary Hollywood Forever, tucked right in the heart of the city. The vast and monumental forest lawn in Glendale, with its cathedral-like mausoleums, the elegant forest lawn in the Hollywood Hills, the serene Catholic beauty of Holy Cross, and the tiny, hidden, impossibly star-packed Westwood Village Memorial Park. In each we will pause at the resting places of the immortals, and I will tell you their stories and the stories of the remarkable monuments that mark them. We will visit 30 of these stars across our whole journey, 15 tonight and 15 when next we walk together. As we walk, notice how differently the great stars chose to be remembered, for these monuments are as varied and as revealing as the stars themselves. Some rest beneath towering marble and gleaming bronze, their tombs as grand as any palace, while others lie beneath the simplest of plaques, or leave behind a single witty line of epitaph that captures a whole personality in a handful of words. Some are sealed away in private, gated sanctuaries fit for royalty, while others chose to rest out in the open where any fan might come and sit a while. Together they tell a story not only of individual lives, but of Hollywood itself, of its glamour and its heartbreak, its triumphs and its tragedies, its enduring belief that beauty and stardom might somehow outlast even death. So take my arm, and let us begin where Hollywood's love affair with its own legends first began, at the tomb of the very first great screen idol. So take my arm, and let us begin where Hollywood's love affair with its own legends first began, at the tomb of the very first great screen idol. Let us begin at the Hollywood Forever Cemetery, that lush and storied garden of the stars in the very heart of the city, at the crypt of Rudolph Valentino, the original Latin lover. Valentino was the first true sex symbol of the movies, a smoldering, exotic screen idol whose films set hearts racing around the world. And when he died with shocking suddenness at just 31, the grief was almost beyond belief. With 100,000 mourners thronging the streets of New York and riots breaking out around his coffin, he had no tomb of his own, and so he was laid, only temporarily it was thought, in a borrowed crypt belonging to a devoted friend, in the cemetery's grand cathedral mausoleum. And there, in that simple wall crypt, he has remained ever since. For decades, a mysterious woman draped all in black appeared each year on the anniversary of his death to lay a single red rose at his crypt. And though the original Lady in Black is long gone, imitators and admirers keep the beautiful tradition alive to this day. He had come to America as a poor Italian immigrant, working as a dishwasher and a dancer, before the camera discovered his smoldering, exotic beauty and made him, almost overnight, the most desired man on earth, the star of the Sheik and the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, whose very image on a poster could sell out a theater. Women fainted at his films and mobbed him in the streets, and no male star before him had ever inspired such hysteria. His sudden death, of a ruptured appendix and its complications, seemed impossible to a world that adored him, and the scenes of public grief were unprecedented in their scale and their fervor, an outpouring for a screen idol the like of which had never been seen. That he lies in a modest, borrowed crypt rather than some soaring monument only deepens the poignancy, for the plainness of the marble is transformed by the devotion it has drawn for a century, the roses and the letters and the whispered thanks of admirers who were not even born when he lived. His grand cathedral mausoleum is itself worth the visit, a long, echoing hall of Gothic arches and stained glass light, and it seems only right that the man who invented screen romance should lie in so cathedral-like a hush. Rumors have swirled for a century that his spirit lingers, that his ghost has been glimpsed among the marble, and whether or not one believes such things, there is no denying the strange and lovely power of the devotion he still commands, decade after decade, from people who know him only as a flickering image from a vanished age. Every year on the anniversary of his passing, admirers still gather at his crypt for a memorial service, keeping faith with the beautiful ritual begun by that first mysterious lady in black, so that nearly 100 years on, the fresh roses never cease. He rests here now, the great lover the world could not stop mourning. Let us travel now, just a little way, across the same lush grounds, to the most magnificent monument in all of Hollywood forever, the memorial of Douglas Fairbanks, the swashbuckling king of silent film. Fairbanks was the dashing, athletic hero of the silent era, the original Robin Hood and thief of Baghdad, a founder of United Artists and of the Academy itself, and the uncrowned king of early Hollywood alongside his wife, Mary Pickford. His resting place befits his stature, for it is the grandest in the cemetery, a stately sarcophagus of gleaming white Georgia marble set at the head of a long, mirror-still reflecting pool, flanked by columns and steps and a bronze wreath, the whole composition as elegant and theatrical as one of his own films. Across the marble is carved a line from Shakespeare's Hamlet, "Good night, sweet prince, and flights of angels sing thee to thy rest," and his son, the actor Douglas Fairbanks Jr., was later laid to rest here with him. He was, more than any single figure, the embodiment of Hollywood's swaggering, optimistic golden youth, leaping across castle walls and swinging from chandeliers with an athletic joy that thrilled millions, the man who essentially invented the swashbuckling adventure film. Off the screen, he was no less a giant, for together with Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, and D.W. Griffith, he founded the studio United Artists, wresting control of the movies away from the moguls and into the hands of the artists. And he helped to found the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences itself, presiding over the very first Academy Awards. His marriage to Mary Pickford made the two of them the reigning royal couple of the movie world, hosting kings and presidents at their fabled estate. That so grand a life should be crowned with so grand a memorial feels only right, and his gleaming marble sarcophagus and its long reflecting pool remain the single most photographed and admired monument in the whole of this storied cemetery. When he was buried, the great figures of Hollywood turned out to mourn him, and it was Charlie Chaplin, his old friend and fellow founder of United Artists, who was among those to stand before the marble and read aloud the Shakespearean farewell carved upon it. The monument was no accident of taste, but a carefully commissioned masterwork, its designs drawn up by artists and its marble quarried and cut in Georgia, especially for the purpose. The family determined that the memorial should be as outstanding as the man it honored. Today it remains the visual centerpiece of the entire cemetery, its long reflecting pool mirroring the sky and the surrounding greenery, drawing photographers and film lovers who come to marvel at the most beautiful star monument in Hollywood. A fitting final bow for the man who, more than any other, gave the movies their sense of dash and grandeur and joy. He rests here now, the dashing prince of the silent screen. Let us travel now to the family plot of Cecil B. DeMille, the towering showman who helped to invent Hollywood itself. DeMille was one of the founding giants of the film industry, the master of the biblical epic and the grand spectacle, the director of the Ten Commandments and the greatest show on earth, a man whose very name became a byword for cinematic grandeur. He rests here at Hollywood forever, in a dignified family plot near the cemetery's tranquil lake, marked by a set of handsome matching monuments, where he lies among his loved ones, a resting place as solid and stately as the epics he brought to the screen. To stand before it is to stand before the very foundations of the movie business, for few people did more to build the dream factory than the man who lies here. He was there at the very beginning, one of the pioneers who transformed a sleepy district of orange groves into the movie capital of the world, directing the first feature film ever made in Hollywood, and going on to a career of more than half a century that helped define what the movies could be. He was the great master of spectacle, of casts of thousands and parting seas and toppling temples, and his epics, from his silent versions of the greatest stories ever told, to the mighty sound remake of the Ten Commandments that still plays every year, drew audiences by the millions and set the standard for cinematic grandeur. His name became so synonymous with lavish direction that to this day, a director shouting for a bigger scene is said to be going all Cecil B. DeMille, his resting place, a stately family plot beside the tranquil waters of the cemetery, is a fitting monument to a founding father of the entire industry, dignified and enduring, drawing film lovers who come to pay homage to one of the men who built the dream. There is a lovely footnote to his legend, for the famous introduction he gave to a beloved weekly television program, welcoming audiences into the world of the movies, made his courtly voice and manner known to a whole new generation who might never have seen his silent epics, cementing his place as the very personification of old Hollywood glamour. He worked almost to the end of his long life, still dreaming up spectacles, still commanding the respect of an industry he had helped to raise from nothing. When film lovers make their pilgrimage to this cemetery, his is among the first names they seek, for to visit him is to visit the source, to stand at the resting place of one of the literal founders of the town of dreams, and his stately plot beside the water, unpretentious yet dignified, offers a quiet and moving place to reflect on just how much of the magic we still enjoy today began with the vision of the man who lies here. Standing at his plot, one feels the whole improbable history of the movies stretching outward from this single quiet spot. From flickering silence to the spectacles of today, so much of it set in motion by the vision of the man who lies here. He rests here now, the grand old showman of Hollywood's golden dawn. Let us travel now to the graceful lakeside memorial of Tyrone Power, one of the most beautiful leading men the movies ever knew. Power was a dazzling matinee idol of the 1930s and 40s, the swashbuckling star of The Mark of Zorro and Blood and Sand, whose extraordinary good looks and genuine talent made him one of the biggest box office draws in the world. He died far too young, at just 44, and his resting place is one of the loveliest in the cemetery, a long, graceful bench of pure white marble set beside the water, inviting the visitor to sit a while in the company of a star. Fans and admirers still come to rest on that quiet bench, and to remember the beautiful young man who once set the screen alight. He came from a long line of actors and carried himself with a natural grace and elegance that the camera adored. And for 2 decades, he was one of the most bankable and beloved stars in Hollywood, dashing and romantic in swashbucklers and swooning in romances, a genuine matinee idol, who was also, quietly, a decorated war hero who had served in the Marines. His sudden death was itself the stuff of Hollywood legend, for it struck him down while he was actually filming a strenuous dueling scene, his great heart giving out at just 44 in the middle of a sword fight, as if he were fated to fall in action like one of his own dashing heroes. His memorial is among the most gracious in the cemetery. A long, low bench of gleaming white marble set beside the still water, and there is something wonderfully in keeping with his warm screen presence in the way it invites the weary visitor simply to sit down and stay a while, to rest in the company of a star who always seemed like a friend. He was, by the accounts of those who knew him, as kind and gracious as he was beautiful, a genuinely beloved figure in a town not always known for such warmth, and the shock of his sudden death sent a wave of grief through all of Hollywood. There is a strange poetry, too, in the fact that the strenuous scene he was filming when his heart failed was itself a duel, so that this graceful star fell, in a sense, with a sword in his hand, exactly as one of his gallant screen heroes might have wished to go. His marble bench has become one of the small treasures of the cemetery, a place where those who love the old films come to sit in the sunshine by the water and remember him. And there is something deeply comforting in a monument that does not merely mark a grave, but offers the living a place to rest and reflect, extending, even now, the easy hospitality that made him a star. He remains, forever, the beautiful young man beside the lake. To this day, his bench remains one of the most photographed spots in the cemetery, a place where visitors linger longer than they mean to, lulled by the water and the marble and the memory of a beautiful life. He rests here now, the handsome idol at peace beside the water. Let us travel now to the Judy Garland Pavilion, the resting place of one of the most beloved performers who ever lived. Garland was, of course, the immortal Dorothy of The Wizard of Oz, a singer and actress of once-in-a-generation talent whose voice could break your heart and whose star has never dimmed in all the decades since. For many years, she lay far away, in a cemetery in New York, but her devoted children knew she had wished to rest among her own in Hollywood, and so, in a beautiful homecoming, her remains were brought here in 2017 and placed in a lovely dedicated pavilion, where at last the countless fans who adore her have a place to come and pay their respects. It has become one of the most visited spots in the whole cemetery, forever bright with flowers, There has perhaps never been a more beloved performer, for she was not merely a great singer and actress, but a presence that people took into their hearts and never let go. The vulnerable, radiant girl whose journey over the rainbow became one of the most cherished films ever made, and whose grown-up concerts and recordings revealed one of the greatest voices of the century. Her life held more than its share of heartache, and when she died far too young, in London, her devoted fans mourned her as if they had lost a member of their own family. For nearly 50 years, she lay in a cemetery 3,000 miles from the town that had made her a legend. And there was always something not quite right about that distance, so that when her children at last brought her home to Hollywood and laid her in a beautiful dedicated pavilion here, it felt like the righting of an old wrong, a beloved daughter finally come home. Today her resting place is forever bright with flowers and letters, one of the most visited and lovingly tended spots in the entire cemetery. Her homecoming created a lovely and lasting gathering place, for the pavilion built to receive her was intended from the first as a family resting place, so that in time others who loved her might join her there, keeping her company as she had once kept the whole world company through its darkest hours. It is impossible to overstate the tenderness fans feel for her, a devotion that has, if anything, only deepened with the years, so that her monument is perpetually adorned with fresh flowers, with ruby slipper tokens and rainbow ribbons and heartfelt notes, a constant, colorful testament to a love that time cannot fade. To stand before it is to feel that love in the very air, the gratitude of generations for the girl who taught us all that there is no place like home, and who, after so many years of wandering, was finally brought home herself, to rest among her own in the town that will always claim her as its most beloved daughter. There is scarcely a spot in all these grounds more beloved or more visited, and the flowers that blanket it speak of a devotion that shows no sign of ever fading. She rests here now, the girl who followed the rainbow home at last. Let us travel now to one of the most striking and beloved monuments in modern Hollywood forever, the grave of Johnny Ramone, the driving force of a legendary band. Ramone was the guitarist and co-founder of the Ramones, the group that virtually invented punk rock, his relentless buzzsaw guitar changing the course of music forever. And his memorial is unlike any other in the cemetery, for it is a full, life-sized bronze statue of the man himself, captured mid-song, legs planted wide, guitar slung low, frozen forever in the act of playing, set dramatically at the edge of the cemetery's lake. It has become a place of pilgrimage for music fans from around the world, who leave guitar picks and flowers at the feet of the statue. He was the relentless engine of the Ramones, the band that stripped rock and roll back down to its raw, fast, ferocious essentials, and in doing so invented punk, inspiring countless thousands of young people to pick up guitars and start bands of their own. His playing was a thing of brutal, brilliant simplicity, a wall of downstroked sound that changed music forever, and he was, by all accounts, the disciplined, hard-nosed leader who held the famously fractious band together through its long and legendary career. His monument here is one of the most beloved and unusual in all of Hollywood forever, breaking utterly with the marble angels and classical columns around it, a full life-sized bronze statue that captures him exactly as his fans remember him, planted wide and leaning into a power chord, his guitar slung low, forever rocking beside the cemetery lake. Music lovers make the pilgrimage from around the world to stand before it, leaving guitar picks and flowers and handwritten thanks at the feet of the man who taught a generation how to play. The statue was created and installed while a beloved fellow founder of the movement was still alive to see it, and it quickly became a rallying point for the whole punk community, a place where fans gather on the anniversaries of his passing to celebrate the music and the fierce, joyful rebellion it stood for. There is something wonderfully right about the fact that in a cemetery full of solemn angels and classical urns, the resting place that draws so many of the young and the loud is this defiant, electric figure caught mid-riff, refusing, even in bronze, to stand still or be solemn. It captures perfectly the spirit of a man and a band who never did anything the expected way, and it ensures that long after the last person who saw them play has gone, visitors will still stumble upon this astonishing statue by the water and feel the raw, immortal energy of the music he helped to invent. He rocks on forever beside the quiet lake. He rests here now, the punk rock pioneer, immortalized in bronze. And so we come to the final grave of our visit to Hollywood forever, and it is a monument not only to a great star but to justice long delayed. Let us travel to the memorial of Hattie McDaniel, a trailblazing actress of enormous historical importance. McDaniel made history as the very first black performer ever to win an Academy Award, honored for her unforgettable performance in Gone with the Wind, a landmark moment in the history of the movies. It was her dying wish to be buried here among her Hollywood peers. But in 1952, the cruel bigotry of the era denied her that place, and she was laid to rest elsewhere. Decades later, the cemetery's new owners, determined to right that historic wrong, erected a beautiful memorial monument in her honor here on these grounds, so that visitors might pay tribute to the pioneer who had been so unjustly turned away. It stands now as a moving symbol of both her greatness and the progress her courage helped to win. Her achievement can hardly be overstated, for in an era of brutal and pervasive racism, she rose through sheer talent and determination to the very top of her profession, and when she won her Academy Award, she became the first African American ever to be so honored, a barrier-breaking moment that would inspire generations of performers to come, even as she was made to sit at a segregated table at the very ceremony that crowned her. She had asked, when her time came, to be buried at this cemetery, then the most prestigious in Hollywood, among the film community she had graced. But the whites-only policy of the day cruelly refused her, and she was laid to rest at another cemetery across town. For decades that injustice stood, until the cemetery's new stewardship, unwilling to let so shameful a chapter remain unanswered, built this handsome memorial in her honor upon these grounds, declaring that a wrong within their power to correct would be corrected. Today her monument stands as a place of tribute and reflection, a marker of both her pioneering greatness and the long, hard road toward justice. There is a further grace to her story, for beyond the single iconic role for which she won her award, she was a gifted and versatile performer across radio, film, and television, a woman who fought quietly and steadily against the narrow parts the industry offered performers of her race, and who insisted on her dignity in a world determined to deny it. Her famous retort to those who criticized the roles she took, that she would rather play a maid than be one, spoke to a hard-won and clear-eyed pragmatism, and to the barriers she was forced to navigate. That her memorial now stands proudly among the monuments of the film community she loved feels like a small but real measure of the justice that was so long withheld, and visitors who pause before it are moved not only by her artistry, but by the long arc of history it represents, a reminder of how far the world has come, and at what cost, and by whose courage. She rests here now, honored at last in the place she was once denied. Let us travel now across the city to the vast and monumental Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, a cemetery so grand it feels like a museum, beginning at the exquisite resting place of Mary Pickford, America's sweetheart. Pickford was the most powerful woman in early Hollywood, the biggest star of the silent screen, a shrewd businesswoman, and a co-founder of United Artists, and the beloved queen of the movies alongside her husband Douglas Fairbanks. Her resting place is one of the most beautiful and exclusive in all of Forest Lawn, a private, gated garden known as the Garden of Memory, hidden behind locked bronze doors, where an elaborate marble monument and graceful statuary surround her among fountains and flowers in a hushed and lovely seclusion fit for royalty. Few are ever permitted inside, which only adds to the sense that here lies true Hollywood aristocracy. With her golden curls and her luminous presence, she was, for a time, the single most famous and best-loved woman in the world, the biggest box office star of the silent era, and a canny pioneer who understood the business of the movies as few others did, negotiating unheard-of contracts and, with her husband and their partners, founding the studio United Artists to give the artists control of their own work. She was, in every sense, Hollywood royalty, and her marriage to Douglas Fairbanks and their legendary estate made the two of them the closest thing America had to a king and queen. It is fitting, then, that her resting place should be among the grandest and most exclusive in all of Forest Lawn, the Garden of Memory, a private and gated sanctuary sealed behind ornate bronze doors, where beyond the reach of the ordinary visitor she lies among marble monuments and graceful statuary, fountains and flowers, in a seclusion granted only to the most elevated of the elect. The very secrecy of the place preserves the aura of majesty that surrounded her in life. She was far more than a pretty face on the screen. For behind those famous curls was one of the shrewdest business minds Hollywood has ever known, a woman who insisted on controlling her own films and her own image at a time when actresses were treated as studio property, and who thereby helped to invent the very idea of the movie star as an independent power. She gave generously too, founding charities and relief funds that aided countless people in the industry and beyond. Her secret garden, sealed away behind its bronze doors, is in a sense the perfect emblem of her career. For just as she guarded her independence and her privacy in life, so in death she rests apart from the crowds, in a beauty and seclusion reserved for the truest aristocracy of the screen. Visitors may glimpse it only from a distance, and that very inaccessibility preserves the mystique, so that she remains, as she was in her golden prime, a queen slightly beyond our reach, adored from afar. She rests here now, the sweetheart of a nation in her secret garden. Let us travel now into the great mausoleum of Forest Lawn, that cathedral of marble, to the crypt of Clark Gable, the man they simply called the King of Hollywood. Gable was the definitive leading man of Hollywood's golden age, the unforgettable Rhett Butler of Gone with the Wind, a star of such effortless charisma that no one before or since has quite matched his crown. He rests here in the hushed grandeur of the great mausoleum, and there is a deep romance to his resting place, for he lies in a crypt beside the great love of his life, the woman he lost far too soon and beside whom he asked, in the end, to spend eternity. To stand before it is to feel the weight of one of Hollywood's greatest love stories. No star ever wore the crown of Hollywood more easily than he did, for he had a rugged, roguish charm and an effortless magnetism that made him, for the better part of 3 decades, the undisputed king of the movies, the ideal of American manhood on the screen, and above all, the immortal Rhett Butler, sweeping through the greatest blockbuster of its age. Behind the swagger, though, was a man capable of the deepest devotion, and the great romance of his life was his marriage to a brilliant and beautiful comedienne who was, by every account, his true match and his one great love. Her death in a wartime plane crash broke something in him that never fully mended, and though he lived on for many years and married again, he never stopped grieving her, and he left instructions that when his own time came he was to be laid beside her, here in the marble hush of the great mausoleum. And so he was, and the 2 crypts rest side by side to this day, a monument not only to 2 great stars but to one of the most enduring love stories the town of dreams ever knew. He wore his enormous stardom with a famous lightness, never seeming to take himself too seriously, and that easy, self-deprecating charm was a large part of why audiences loved him so completely and so durably, for he seemed less a remote god than the best and most likable of ordinary men. Magnified, he served his country in a real war, flying dangerous combat missions after the loss of his wife, seeking, some said, to follow her into the sky. And though he found a measure of happiness again in his later years, those who knew him best understood that a part of his heart had been buried with her long before, and that his quiet instruction to be laid at her side was the truest expression of a love he had never stopped feeling. Their side-by-side crypts in the marble stillness of the great mausoleum have become a place of pilgrimage for the incurably romantic, who come to stand before the resting place of Hollywood's king, and to feel, in that quiet hall, the enduring power of a love stronger than death. No visitor who knows their story can stand in that marble hall without feeling the ache and the beauty of it. 2 crowns laid down side by side, a king who spent his last decades quietly waiting to rejoin his queen. He rests here now, the king, beside his beloved queen. Let us travel now, only a step away, to the crypt beside him, the resting place of Carole Lombard, the luminous comedienne who was the love of Gable's life. Lombard was the reigning queen of screwball comedy, a dazzling, funny, free-spirited blonde beauty adored by all of Hollywood and married, in its most glamorous union, to the king himself. Her death was one of the great tragedies of the era, for she was lost at just 33 in a plane crash while returning from a tour to sell war bonds, a patriot to the last. Gable was shattered, and he saw to it that she was laid to rest here in the great mausoleum under her married name, and beside her he would one day come to lie. Their crypts, side by side in the marble hush, form one of the most poignant sights in all of Forest Lawn. She was the funniest woman in Hollywood, a dazzling, quick-witted, gloriously irreverent blonde who reigned supreme over the screwball comedies of the 1930s, as beautiful as any dramatic star but blessed with a comic genius and an earthy, unpretentious charm that made everyone who knew her adore her. Her marriage to the King of Hollywood was the industry's most glamorous union, a genuine love match between its reigning royalty, and her death was one of the great tragedies of the age, for at just 33, at the very height of her powers, she was killed when her plane went down in the mountains as she flew home from a tour selling war bonds to support the nation, making her, in a very real sense, one of the first great celebrity casualties of the war effort. A devastated Hollywood mourned her, and a devastated Gable saw that she was laid to rest here in the great mausoleum, keeping the crypt beside her for himself. There she remains, forever young, forever laughing, the queen who was taken far too soon. She was that rarest of stars, a great beauty who was also a great clown, utterly without vanity, famous for her salty humor and her generous, down-to-earth warmth, so that she was perhaps the best-loved woman in the film colony, adored by the crew members and the co-stars and everyone else lucky enough to know her. Her final act was one of genuine heroism, for she had thrown herself into the war effort with characteristic energy, and it was on the way home from a triumphant rally, having helped raise an enormous sum for the nation, that she was lost. President and nation mourned her as a fallen patriot, and Hollywood mourned her as one of its own bright lights extinguished. That she rests here forever young, forever at the height of her beauty and her fame, gives her monument a particular poignancy, and the sight of her crypt beside the king's, the two of them reunited in the marble hush, never fails to move those who come to pay their respects. Fans of the Golden Age leave flowers at her crypt still, mourning the comic genius the world was allowed to enjoy for far too short a time, and marveling that so bright a light could have been extinguished so young. She rests here now, the laughing queen who never grew old. Let us travel now to one of the most exclusive resting places in the entire cemetery, the private marble sanctuary of Jean Harlow, the original blonde bombshell. Harlow was the sensation of early 1930s Hollywood, the platinum-haired original from whom every blonde bombshell since has descended, a witty, magnetic star cut down with heartbreaking suddenness at just 26. Her death devastated Hollywood, and it is said that a heartbroken admirer, the actor William Powell, spent a small fortune, some $25,000, an immense sum in those days, to purchase for her a private marble room within the great mausoleum, a beautiful and secluded sanctuary all her own. There she has rested ever since, in a splendor and privacy granted to very few, a jewel-box tomb for a star who blazed so briefly. She burned across the Hollywood sky like a comet, blindingly bright and heartbreakingly brief, the original blonde bombshell whose shimmering platinum hair and quick, knowing wit made her the sensation of the early 1930s and the template for every glamorous blonde who would follow, from Marilyn Monroe onward. She was, by all accounts, as warm and funny off the screen as she was electric upon it, beloved by her colleagues and adored by the public. And then, with shattering suddenness, she was gone, felled by illness at just 26, at the very peak of her fame, in one of the most shocking early deaths Hollywood had known. The grief was immense, and the depth of one heartbroken admirer's devotion is written into her very resting place, for it is said that the actor William Powell, who had loved her, spent an enormous sum to secure for her a private marble sanctuary within the great mausoleum, a beautiful and secluded room where she might rest in a privacy and splendor afforded to almost no one. There, the platinum goddess has lain ever since. In her handful of years at the top, she made a string of hit films and became one of the defining images of her decade. Her look and her attitude so influential that they echo through the glamour of Hollywood to this day, every subsequent platinum blonde walking, knowingly or not, in her footsteps. Her early death robbed the movies of one of their brightest and most beloved talents, and the outpouring of grief was tremendous, thousands lining up to pay their respects. The private marble sanctuary that received her, secured at such extraordinary expense by a man who had loved her, remains among the most coveted and least accessible resting places in all of Forest Lawn, a jewel-box tomb hidden within the vast great mausoleum, and its very exclusivity has kept her, in death as in life, an object of fascination and desire. She lies there, still in her secluded splendor, the original bombshell, forever 26, forever the dazzling comet that lit up the Hollywood sky. She rests here now, the platinum goddess in her private marble room. Let us travel now to the Garden of Memory, to the resting place of Humphrey Bogart, the immortal tough guy with the tender heart. Bogart was one of the greatest and most beloved actors in the history of the movies, the trench-coated hero of Casablanca and the hard-boiled detective of the Maltese Falcon, a man whose weary, honorable screen presence defined an entire kind of American cool. He rests here in the beautiful private garden of memory, and his tomb holds one of the most touching secrets in all of Hollywood, for his devoted widow, the actress Lauren Bacall, is said to have placed inside a small gold whistle, engraved with the famous line she had spoken to him in the very first film they made together, "If you want anything, just whistle." He was, for many, the very greatest of all the classic Hollywood stars, a slight, weary-eyed, gravel-voiced actor who somehow became the ultimate symbol of rumpled, world-weary integrity, the man who ran the gin joint in Casablanca and hunted the black bird in the Maltese Falcon, whose flawed, decent, unforgettable heroes defined a whole American ideal of cool. And the great romance of his life was his marriage to a young actress he met on a film set, a love story for the ages. And it is that love which gives his resting place its most tender and famous secret. In the very first picture the two of them made together, she had spoken to him a line that became one of the most celebrated in all of cinema, teasing that if he wanted anything, he had only to whistle. And when he died, she is said to have placed within his tomb a small gold whistle, engraved with those very words, so that he might call her still. It is one of the loveliest of all Hollywood's true stories, and it transforms this quiet grave in the Garden of Memory into a monument to enduring love. His marriage to the young actress had scandalized and then enchanted Hollywood, for she was decades his junior, and yet theirs proved to be one of the truest and most devoted of all the town's celebrated unions, a genuine meeting of equals who adored each other until his death parted them. When he was dying of illness, she cared for him with fierce tenderness, and her grief afterward was profound and lasting. The little gold whistle she is said to have placed within his tomb, engraved with the teasing line from the film on which they had fallen in love, is the kind of detail that could only come from real and enduring devotion, and it has made his quiet grave in the beautiful Garden of Memory a shrine for everyone who believes in love that outlasts death. To know the story is to be unable to stand before his resting place without a catch in the throat, for it is not the monument of a mere movie tough guy, but of a man who was, above all, deeply and truly loved. It is, perhaps, the single most romantic secret in all of Hollywood's cemeteries, and it draws the sentimental from far and wide to stand a moment in the presence of so faithful a love. He rests here now, with his love's whistle to call him home. Let us travel now to another grand resting place within the great mausoleum, the memorial of Elizabeth Taylor, perhaps the last true movie goddess. Taylor was a legend among legends, the violet-eyed beauty whose talent, glamour, scandals, and sheer star power made her the most famous woman in the world for much of the 20th century. From her childhood stardom to her towering triumphs and 8 tumultuous marriages, she rests here in the great mausoleum, beneath an elegant, curving marble monument designed to her own exacting wishes, a memorial as stylish as the woman herself. And she left the world laughing in her own inimitable way, for she had arranged to arrive at her own funeral 15 minutes late, joking that she could not be on time even for that. She was, quite simply, one of the most famous human beings who ever lived, a child star who grew into the most beautiful woman in the world, a 2-time Academy Award winner of genuine talent, and a figure of such magnetic glamour and such operatic personal drama, with her legendary jewels and her legendary loves and her 8 marriages to 7 husbands, that the whole world followed her every move for the better part of a century. She was also a woman of enormous heart, who used her fame courageously in the darkest days of a great epidemic to fight for the suffering and the stigmatized when few others would. Her resting place in the great mausoleum is as elegant and singular as she was, a graceful, curving marble monument that she is said to have designed to her own precise specifications, refusing to leave even this last detail to chance. And she orchestrated one final, perfect joke, arranging to arrive at her own funeral service, a deliberate 15 minutes late, a last wink from a woman who had always lived exactly on her own glamorous terms. Hers was a life lived at a pitch of glamour and drama that no one has quite matched since, a career that spanned from a horse-loving child in a beloved family film to the searing adult triumphs that won her the industry's highest honors. All of it played out against a backdrop of fabulous wealth, world-famous jewels, and a romantic life so operatic that the whole planet followed it breathlessly. But beneath the diamonds was a woman of real substance and real courage, who threw the full weight of her fame behind the fight against a terrifying epidemic when doing so was neither safe nor fashionable, raising vast sums and comforting the dying and shaming a reluctant world into action, work that may prove her most lasting legacy of all. Her elegant marble monument, designed to her own specifications, and her final, perfectly timed joke of arriving late to her own farewell, are the fitting last gestures of a woman who was, to the very end, wholly and gloriously herself, in complete command of her own legend. To visit her elegant monument is to pay respects not merely to a movie star but to a genuine force of nature, a woman who commanded the world's attention for the better part of a century and used it, at the last, for good. She rests here now, the last of the great goddesses, fashionably late to the end. Let us travel now to the holly terrace of the great mausoleum, to the tomb of Michael Jackson, the king of pop. Jackson was a phenomenon without equal, the child prodigy who became the greatest and most successful entertainer of his age, a figure of almost unimaginable global fame. He rests here in Holly Terrace, one of the most private and ornate wings of the entire great mausoleum, a hushed hall of gleaming marble, stained glass, and hushed reverence that is not open to the general public, so that even in death he is guarded and set apart. It is a resting place of quiet, grand seclusion, fitting for a man who was adored by billions and yet was so rarely at peace in life. He was a phenomenon the likes of which the world had never seen and may never see again. A mesmerizing child prodigy who grew into the single most famous and successful entertainer on the planet, the maker of the best-selling album in the history of recorded music, a dancer and singer and showman of such transcendent gifts that his fame reached into every country and every corner of the earth. His life was as extraordinary and, in the end, as sorrowful as his talent was vast, a story of dazzling triumph shadowed by profound loneliness and struggle. He rests here in Holly Terrace, one of the most private, ornate, and exclusive wings of the entire great mausoleum, a hushed and gleaming hall of marble and stained glass that is closed to the general public, so that even now he is set apart and protected, watched over and rarely disturbed. There is a quiet fittingness in it, that a man who was adored by billions and yet so seldom left in peace should rest at last in so guarded and so perfect a silence, beyond the reach of the crowds who loved him. His influence on music, on dance, on the very art of performance is almost impossible to measure, for he redefined what a pop star could be and shattered barriers that had stood for generations, becoming a truly global icon at a scale the world had never known. The short films he made to accompany his songs transformed an entire industry, and his effortless, gravity-defying movement changed dance forever, so that decades on, his signature steps are instantly recognized on every continent. His resting place in the exclusive seclusion of Holly Terrace is guarded and quiet in a way his life so rarely was, and there is a genuine tenderness in that, in the thought of a man so relentlessly pursued and scrutinized, finally granted an unbroken peace behind the stained glass and the marble. Fans who make the journey cannot enter that private wing, but they gather nearby to leave their tributes and their love. A devotion that has, if anything, only grown in the years since the world lost him, mourning still the boy who gave it so much joy. Long after the controversies and the headlines have faded, it is the sheer, transcendent joy of his music and his movement that endures, and that his admirers celebrate when they gather near his resting place, to remember him. He rests here now, the king of pop, at last in perfect quiet. And so we come to the final grave of this first half of our journey, and it belongs to a man who built an entire kingdom of dreams. Let us travel to a quiet, beautifully landscaped private garden tucked just to the left of the Freedom Mausoleum, to the resting place of Walt Disney. Disney was one of the most influential and beloved figures of the 20th century, the visionary who gave the world Mickey Mouse, the first great animated features, and the magical theme parks that bear his name, a man whose imagination reshaped childhood itself for generations across the globe. His resting place is a small, serene, exquisitely tended garden, set apart and hushed, marked by a simple and elegant plaque amid the flowers, with a graceful statue standing quiet watch nearby, a spot of real peace and beauty. And here we may lay to rest too, one of the most famous myths in all of Hollywood, for despite the enduring legend that he was frozen to await some future revival, The truth is that Walt Disney was cremated and has rested peacefully in this lovely garden ever since. It is difficult to name another single person who brought more simple joy to more people across more of the world, for he built, quite literally, an empire of the imagination. From the little mouse he first gave voice to himself, to the groundbreaking animated features that became the shared inheritance of childhood everywhere, to the revolutionary theme parks that made the fantasies real enough to walk through. He was a tireless, restless visionary, a man who kept dreaming bigger to the very end, and his loss to illness was mourned around the globe. His resting place, in keeping with the man, is not grand or ostentatious, but simply perfectly lovely. A small and secluded private garden of exquisite landscaping, hushed and green and set gently apart, where a modest plaque marks the spot amid the flowers and a graceful statue keeps its watch. And here, at his peaceful graveside, we can gently set aside forever that most persistent of Hollywood legends, for he was not frozen to await some future waking, but was cremated and laid to rest in this beautiful garden. He was, in the fullest sense, a self-made man, a farm boy from the Midwest who arrived in Hollywood with little more than a talent for drawing and an inexhaustible imagination, and who built from nothing one of the most beloved names in the history of the world, a name now synonymous with childhood joy itself. He collected more of the industry's highest honors than any other individual ever has, and yet his truest monument is not any statue but the simple, universal happiness he created. The films and characters and enchanted places that have become the shared language of delight for people of every nation and every generation. His modest, lovely garden grave stands in gentle contrast to the towering mausoleums nearby, and it draws a steady stream of grateful visitors who come, often with children of their own, to thank the dreamer whose imagination shaped their happiest memories. He rests here now, the dreamer who gave the whole world its magic. And so, friends, we pause. We have wandered tonight among the most magnificent monuments in Hollywood, from the flower-strewn crypt of the first great screen idol to the marble sanctuaries of the Golden Age gods and goddesses, and we have seen how the town of dreams honors its own, with reflecting pools and secret gardens, with bronze statues and jewel-box tombs. 15 more legends await us still, at the elegant forest lawn in the Hollywood Hills, at the serene Holy Cross, and in the tiny, star-packed Westwood, where some of the most famous names of all are gathered close together. Consider, as you rest, how much of the history of the movies we have touched in this single evening, from the very first sex symbol the screen ever produced to the biggest pop star the world has ever known, from the silent pioneers who built the industry to the goddesses of its golden age. We have seen the grandest monument in Hollywood, and one of its most modest, a defiant punk rocker cast in bronze, and a beloved dreamer resting quietly beneath the flowers, a memorial that corrects a historic injustice, and a jewel-box tomb bought for love. Each of these resting places, grand or humble, tells us something not only about the star it honors, but about how that star wished to be remembered, and about the strange and beautiful way this town has always insisted that its legends deserve a kind of immortality. And notice, too, how many of these graves are marked above all by love. The love of a husband for the wife he could not bear to be parted from, of a widow for the man she still calls with a golden whistle, of countless fans who keep the flowers fresh and the roses coming, year after year, for stars they never met. That devotion is its own kind of monument, invisible but everywhere, and it is what keeps these beautiful places alive. So rest here a moment among these first 15, and when you are ready, we shall walk on together, deeper into the beautiful history of Hollywood written in stone. Welcome back, friends, and step once more through the gates with me, for our glamorous tour of Hollywood's most stunning celebrity graves is only half complete, and 15 more legends await us in the marble and the sunshine. In the first part of our journey, we wandered the lush lawns of Hollywood Forever and the cathedral halls of Forest Lawn and Glendale, and we marveled at the grandest monuments the town of dreams has ever raised, the reflecting pools and secret gardens, the bronze statues and jewel-box tombs. Tonight we travel on to 3 more of the great star cemeteries, each with its own beauty and its own gathered legends. We will visit the elegant forest lawn in the Hollywood Hills, where a fierce grande dame keeps watch over the very studio where she waged her famous battles. We will cross to the serene and lovely Holy Cross in Culver City, where a crooner and a love goddess and the immortal Dracula himself have come to rest. And we will end where the greatest concentration of stars in all the world lies, gathered in a tiny, hidden garden of a cemetery, the star-studded Westwood Village Memorial Park, where witty epitaphs and flower-strewn crypts mark the resting places of some of the most beloved names of all, and where our whole journey will close at the most famous and most visited grave in the history of Hollywood. You will notice, as we walk this second half, a lovely difference in the character of these resting places, for while the first part of our tour was crowned with the grandest and most monumental of tombs, tonight we will find as much beauty in simplicity and in wit as in marble and gold. Some of the most beloved stars of all chose the humblest of graves, a plain plaque in the grass giving no hint of the legend beneath, while others left behind a single, perfect line of epitaph that makes us laugh out loud and tells us more about who they were than any statue ever could. So take my arm once more, and let us continue, beginning with a voice as smooth and warm as any that ever was, in the marble halls of Forest Lawn. So take my arm once more, and let us continue, beginning with a voice as smooth and warm as any that ever was, in the marble halls of Forest Lawn. Let us return first to the great Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, to the Freedom Mausoleum, to the resting place of Nat King Cole, the owner of one of the most beloved voices in American music. Cole began as a dazzling jazz pianist, a virtuoso of rare and effortless brilliance, but it was his singing that made him immortal. That warm, intimate, velvet baritone caressing songs like Unforgettable and Mona Lisa until they became part of the fabric of American life. He broke barriers too, becoming the first black entertainer to host a national television variety program. And he did it all with a grace and dignity that won him admirers around the world, even as he faced the ugly prejudice of his era. When cancer took him at just 45, the loss was felt across the whole of music. He rests here in the beautiful Freedom Mausoleum, near other stars of his generation, behind a simple marble front in a place of hushed dignity. He was born the son of a preacher and raised on gospel and jazz, and by his early 20s his trio had made him one of the most respected pianists in the country, an innovator whose light, swinging touch influenced a generation of players. But when audiences heard him sing, everything changed, for that voice, warm and unhurried and impossibly smooth, turned out to be one of the great instruments of the century, and hit followed hit, until he was among the best-selling recording artists in the world. His pioneering television program broke ground that had never been broken, though the cowardice of sponsors who feared offending prejudiced viewers eventually forced it off the air, and in justice he met with characteristic dignity, observing wryly that the networks were afraid of the dark. Through it all he remained a figure of immense grace and warmth, and his early death from cancer robbed the world of a voice in its prime. The countless recordings he left behind, from tender ballads to swinging standards, have never lost their power, and his velvet baritone remains as beloved today as it ever was. There is a particular tenderness, too, in the way his music has been passed down. For years after his death, his own daughter, herself a gifted singer, recorded a duet with his preserved voice on the song most associated with him, so that father and daughter sang together across the years. A moment that moved listeners around the world and introduced him to yet another generation. His resting place in the Freedom Mausoleum draws admirers who come simply to stand near the source of that unforgettable sound and to pay their respects to a man who broke barriers with grace and left behind a catalog of songs that feel less like recordings than like old friends. To hear that voice is to feel instantly warmed, and it is impossible, standing before his crypt, not to hear it playing somewhere in the mind, as smooth and as comforting as it ever was. He rests here now, the velvet voice that time can never wear away. Let us travel now across the city to the elegant Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills, to the commanding sarcophagus of Bette Davis, the fiercest and most formidable actress of Hollywood's golden age. Davis was a force of nature unlike any other. A two-time Academy Award winner whose blazing intensity and refusal to be anything less than the best made her a legend, the star of Jezebel and Dark Victory and the incomparable All About Eve, and a woman who fought the all-powerful studios for the right to control her own career. Her resting place is as bold as she was, a grand white sarcophagus set high in the courts of remembrance, and in a detail she would surely have relished. It looks out across the valley toward the Warner Brothers studio, so that she gazes for eternity upon the very lot where she waged her most famous battles. Carved upon it is one of the greatest of all epitaphs. She did it the hard way, and her tomb, like that of another legend we shall meet tonight, is often marked with the lipstick kisses of adoring fans. She appeared in more than 100 films across 6 decades, and she approached every one of them with the same ferocious commitment, unwilling to coast on beauty or charm, and determined always to disappear completely into her characters, however unglamorous or unsympathetic they might be. That fierce integrity made her enemies and made her a legend, for she battled her own studio in court for better roles, fought directors and co-stars for the good of the picture, and refused, all her life, to be anyone's idea of a docile leading lady. The epitaph carved upon her grand sarcophagus, suggested to her years earlier by a director who had witnessed her fighting spirit firsthand, captures the whole of her in 5 perfect words. An acknowledgement that nothing about her towering career had come easily and that she would not have had it any other way. That her tomb looks out toward the studio where she waged her most legendary battles is a poetic touch she would have savored, and that admirers now leave lipstick kisses upon it is a tribute to a star who remained, to the end, absolutely and gloriously herself. She had a genius for playing difficult, formidable, even monstrous women without ever begging for the audience's sympathy, trusting instead in the raw truth of her performances, and in doing so she expanded forever the range of what a leading lady could be, refusing to be confined to the pretty and the pleasant. Her later career took a gloriously theatrical turn into horror that introduced her to a whole new audience, and she worked almost to the very end, indomitable to the last. To visit her grand hilltop sarcophagus is to feel the presence of a true original, a woman who gave no quarter and asked none, and whose fierce, uncompromising artistry blazed a trail that countless others would follow. The lipstick kisses her admirers leave upon the marble are a fittingly bold tribute to so bold a star. She rests here now, the queen who did it her way to the very end. Let us travel now, just a little way across the same hillside, to the glittering monument of Liberace, the most dazzling showman the world of music ever produced. Liberace was a phenomenon, a piano virtuoso who wrapped his genuine musical gifts in a spectacle of rhinestones, furs, and candelabra so extravagant that he became, at the height of his fame, the highest-paid entertainer on earth, beloved by millions for the sheer joyful excess of it all. And his resting place is every bit as flamboyant as the man, an ornate marble monument befitting Mr. Showmanship himself, adorned with a flourish of his famous signature and the carved image of a grand piano, so that even in the solemn quiet of the cemetery he sparkles still. It is impossible to stand before it and not smile, for it captures perfectly the irrepressible showman who believed that too much of a good thing was simply wonderful. He understood, better than almost anyone in show business, that audiences longed for glamour and spectacle and pure, unapologetic fun, and he gave it to them without restraint, arriving on stage in dazzling sequined costumes and furs with trains yards long, seating himself at a piano topped with his trademark candelabra, and playing the classics with a showman's flourish and a wink. Critics sometimes sneered, but the public adored him, filling the grandest venues for decades and making him, at his peak, the highest-paid entertainer in the world. Beneath the glitter was a genuinely accomplished pianist and a shrewd, hard-working professional who never forgot that his job was to send people home happy. His resting place carries that spirit gloriously into eternity, an ornate marble monument gleaming with his flourishing signature and the carved likeness of his beloved piano, a memorial that refuses, just as he always did, to be modest or restrained. To find it is to be reminded that he brought a little sparkle into a great many ordinary lives and asked only to be loved in return. He was, in his way, a genuine pioneer, one of the first great stars to understand the power of television to create intimacy with an audience, welcoming viewers into his glittering world with a warmth and a twinkle that made them feel like honored guests at a private party. He turned excess into an art form and unapologetic joy into a career. And though sophisticates loved to mock him, he laughed all the way to the bank, famously observing that he had cried about such criticism all the way to the bank. His extravagant monument, gleaming and ornate, refuses even now to apologize for any of it, and there is something genuinely heartening in that, in a resting place that celebrates rather than solemnizes, that insists on sparkle in a place of shadows. Visitors who come upon it tend to laugh with delight and affection, for it is exactly, gloriously right, the perfect eternal home for a man whose whole gift was for making the world feel a little more dazzling than it really is. He rests here now, still sparkling, the showman who dazzled the world. Let us travel now to a simpler resting place nearby, that of Buster Keaton, the silent comedy genius they called the Great Stone Face. Keaton was one of the true geniuses of the cinema, a comedian and filmmaker of astonishing invention whose deadpan expression never cracked even as he performed some of the most dangerous and breathtaking physical stunts ever committed to film, in masterpieces like The General and Sherlock Jr., that are studied and revered to this day. For a man of such towering achievement, his grave is remarkably modest, a simple and unassuming marker that gives little hint of the greatness of the man beneath it, and there is something fitting in that quiet understatement. For Keaton was never a showman off the screen, but a humble craftsman devoted to his art. Film lovers seek it out with real reverence, knowing they stand before one of the founding masters of comedy itself. He was, along with a very small handful of others, one of the supreme geniuses of the silent screen, an actor, director, and stuntman of breathtaking, daring, and ingenuity, who conceived and executed some of the most astonishing physical comedy ever filmed, always with that famous, unsmiling face that never betrayed the slightest hint of the chaos around him. He performed his own perilous stunts, courting real injury for the sake of a laugh, dropping buildings around himself and dangling from moving trains, and the films he made in his prime are now regarded by critics and filmmakers as among the greatest ever made, studied and marveled at by each new generation of movie makers. His career suffered cruelly when the industry changed and lost interest in him for a time, but he lived to see himself rediscovered and hailed at last as the master he was. His modest marker gives no hint of all this, and there is a quiet dignity in that understatement, for the greatness of the man speaks through his films and needs no marble to proclaim it. What makes his achievement all the more remarkable is that he was not merely performing, but engineering, dreaming up impossible visual gags and then figuring out how to make them real with the crude technology of his day, so that his films are marvels of invention as much as of comedy, filled with images, a house collapsing around an unharmed man, a locomotive crashing through a burning bridge, that have never lost their power to astonish. He worked without a net, in every sense, and paid for it in broken bones, and yet the face never moved, the calm never broke, and that impossible serenity in the midst of catastrophe became one of the most beloved images in all of cinema. Filmmakers today still study his work for its precision and its genius, and his reputation, once allowed to fade, now stands higher than ever, secure among the greatest artists the movies have produced. His humble grave, sought out by those who know, is a quiet place to honor a loud and glorious talent. He rests here now, the Great Stone Face, at perfect rest. Let us travel now to the nearby resting place of Stan Laurel, the beloved thin half of the greatest comedy duo of all time. Laurel was the creative genius behind Laurel and Hardy, the gentle, bumbling, sweet-natured innocent whose partnership with his portly friend produced laughter that has never stopped echoing down the generations, and behind the scenes he was the tireless craftsman who wrote and shaped much of their timeless comedy. He was beloved by all who knew him for his kindness and his devotion to his art, working at his gags almost to the end of his life. His grave, too, is simple and unpretentious, a modest marker for a modest and gentle man, and admirers who visit often leave a fitting tribute, remembering the fine mess he and his partner so delightfully got into for our endless joy. Together with his beloved partner, he formed what many consider the greatest comedy team in the history of the movies. The slender, childlike, innocent forever, paired with his stout, exasperated friend, the two of them stumbling through one beautifully constructed catastrophe after another in films that remain as funny today as when they were made. He was, in truth, the creative engine of the partnership, a tireless perfectionist who labored over the writing and the timing of their gags long after the cameras had stopped, devoted body and soul to the craft of making people laugh. Those who knew him spoke of his gentleness and his generosity, and of a man utterly without ego despite his enormous gifts, who answered his own fan mail and welcomed admirers warmly to the very end of his life. His simple grave befits so unassuming a man, and the devotees who seek it out do so with deep affection, remembering the gentle soul who, with his partner, gave the world a fine and glorious mess of laughter that has never stopped. When his partner died some years before him, he was heartbroken, and though many urged him to continue with a new collaborator, he refused ever to perform again, saying that there could be no act without his friend. So complete had their partnership been. He spent his final years quietly, still beloved, still visited by the younger comedians who revered him as a master and a founding father of their art. And he received them all with warmth, generously sharing the secrets of his craft. It is said that some of the great comics of later generations counted a visit to him among the proudest moments of their lives. His simple grave, marked without fanfare, draws a steady stream of these devotees still, who come to pay homage to the gentle perfectionist whose comedy has outlived him by so many years and shows no sign of ever growing old. To stand before it is to feel a rush of affection for the sweet, funny, endlessly inventive soul who asked for so little and gave so much. The little tune associated with the duo is often heard hummed softly by visitors who find his marker, a gentle and affectionate salute to a partnership that never stopped giving joy. He rests here now, the gentle genius who taught the world to laugh. Let us travel now across to the serene and beautiful Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, to the resting place of Bela Lugosi, the man who became the immortal face of Dracula. Lugosi was a Hungarian actor of real stage pedigree who found lasting immortality in a single, indelible role. His mesmerizing, accented, aristocratic Count Dracula, so definitive that it has shaped every vampire to slink across a screen in the century since. So completely was he identified with the role that it both made and, in a sense, trapped him. And in the most famous detail of his resting place, one that has passed into Hollywood legend, he was laid to rest wearing one of the flowing Dracula capes he had made so iconic, a decision made by his family to honor the character that had defined his life. He had been a respected and even celebrated actor in his native Hungary and on the Broadway stage before Hollywood came calling, a matinee idol with genuine dramatic gifts, but it was one role above all that swallowed and immortalized him, his hypnotic, courtly, unforgettable portrayal of the vampire count that defined the character forever and made him a horror icon for the ages. The very completeness of that identification proved a curse as well as a blessing, for he found himself typecast, unable to escape the shadow of the cape, and his later years held real hardship and struggle. But his place in the history of the movies was secure, for no one who has ever seen him as the Count forgets him, and his influence echoes through every vampire tale told since. The decision to lay him to rest in one of the flowing capes he had made so iconic has become one of the most beloved legends in all of Hollywood's cemeteries, a final, perfect merging of the man and the immortal character, so that he lies here forever, in the costume of the role that made him deathless. His influence is almost impossible to overstate, for the very image most of us carry of a vampire, the courtly manner, the piercing gaze, the hypnotic accent, the sweep of the black cape, comes very largely from him, so that every actor who has since played the role, and every parody and homage besides, walks in the long shadow he cast. Late in his life, a new generation of horror fans and filmmakers embraced him with real love, honoring the dignity he had always brought to even the humblest productions. And he has been portrayed with great tenderness on the screen in the years since, his difficult later life treated with the sympathy it deserves. His grave at Holy Cross has become a place of pilgrimage for lovers of classic horror who come to pay their respects to the man in the cape, and there is something both eerie and touching about the thought of him resting there in his familiar costume, forever the Count, forever undead in the only way that matters, in the undying memory of everyone who has ever thrilled to his gaze. He rests here now, in his cape, the Count who never truly dies. Let us travel now, elsewhere in the peaceful grounds of Holy Cross, to the grave of Bing Crosby, whose voice was for decades the very sound of America. Crosby was one of the most popular and influential entertainers in the history of the world, the easygoing crooner whose relaxed, intimate style revolutionized popular singing, the best-selling recording artist of his age, and the voice behind White Christmas, the single most successful song ever recorded. He was an Oscar-winning actor too, and a beloved fixture of film and radio for half a century, as comfortable and familiar to the public as an old friend. Yet his grave here at Holy Cross is strikingly humble, a plain and simple marker in the ground that gives no hint of the staggering fame of the man who lies beneath it, a modesty that says much about how he wished to be remembered. It is difficult now to grasp just how enormous his fame once was, For across the middle decades of the 20th century, he was very nearly the most popular entertainer alive. A fixture of radio, records, and film whose relaxed, conversational way of singing changed popular music forever, teaching a whole industry that a microphone could carry warmth and intimacy rather than mere volume. His recording of a certain Christmas song remains, to this day, the best-selling single of all time. A piece of the holiday season for people who have no idea it was ever new. He won an Academy Award for his acting, headlined beloved films for decades, and became, in the public mind, a figure of easygoing, pipe-smoking contentment, as familiar and comfortable as a member of the family. That so towering a star should choose so plain and humble a grave says a great deal about the man. And visitors who find the simple marker are often struck by the contrast between the modesty of the stone and the magnitude of the legend beneath it. He was also, behind the easygoing image, a serious innovator and a shrewd businessman, an early champion of the recording technologies that would transform the industry, and a canny investor whose interests ranged far beyond music. But it is the voice that endures, that warm, unforced, endlessly reassuring sound that seems to promise that everything will be all right, and that returns, faithfully, every December, filling stores and homes and radio waves with a song about a white Christmas that has become inseparable from the season itself. Generations who know nothing else about him know that song and love it, and in that sense he remains one of the most widely heard performers who has ever lived, a familiar comfort to millions who never knew his face. His plain grave at Holy Cross, so at odds with the scale of his fame, invites a quiet reflection on a man who gave the world one of its most beloved sounds and asked, in the end, for so modest a memorial. Even now his recordings sell steadily, year after year, a testament to the timeless comfort of that unhurried sound, and his humble grave draws the faithful who simply wish to say thank you. He rests here now, the easy voice that warmed a nation's winters. Let us travel now to another grave within Holy Cross, that of Rita Hayworth, the dazzling star they crowned the love goddess. Hayworth was one of the most glamorous women ever to grace the screen. A breathtaking red-headed beauty and a gifted dancer whose performance in Gilda made her the reigning sex symbol of the 1940s, the pin-up adored by a generation of soldiers, and the very image of Hollywood glamour. Behind the goddess was a woman whose life held real sorrow, and her final years were shadowed by a cruel illness that robbed her of herself far too soon. She rests here at Holy Cross beneath a graceful marker inscribed with a loving tribute to the beauty she was, a quiet and dignified spot for a woman who had blazed so brightly. Admirers still come to remember the goddess who danced her way into cinema's eternal memory. She was born into a family of dancers and trained from childhood, and that grace shows in every frame of her films, for she was not only one of the most beautiful women ever photographed, but a genuinely gifted dancer who could hold her own beside the finest partners in Hollywood. Her performance in a certain smoldering film noir made her the definitive glamour icon of her decade, the pinup whose image accompanied a generation of servicemen through a world war, and the very embodiment of screen allure. But she once observed, with heartbreaking honesty, that men fell in love with the goddess she played and woke to find themselves married to a real and ordinary woman, and her private life brought her more sorrow than joy. Her final years were dimmed by a cruel and then little understood illness that stole her memory and herself, making her passing all the more poignant. She rests now in the peace of Holy Cross, beneath a marker bearing a tender tribute, and admirers still come to honor the dazzling star who gave the screen some of its most unforgettable glamour. She made films with the greatest partners and directors of her age, and her dancing, in particular, has a fluid, joyful grace that time has not diminished, so that to watch her glide across a screen is to understand at once why the world fell so completely under her spell. She longed, by her own account, to be loved for herself rather than for the dazzling image the studios had built, and there is a poignancy in the gap between the goddess the public adored and the shy, private woman she felt herself to be. The illness that dimmed her final years was, at the time, so little understood that her struggles were cruelly misjudged. She rests now in dignity and peace at Holy Cross, her marker bearing loving words, and the admirers who seek her out come to honor not only the love goddess of the screen but the real woman behind her and the courage of a life that held as much sorrow as glamour. She rests here now, the love goddess at peace at last. Let us travel now to the tiny and legendary Westwood Village Memorial Park, a hidden pocket cemetery tucked behind the high rises of the city, where an astonishing number of stars lie gathered close together, beginning with Dean Martin, the king of cool himself. Martin was the epitome of effortless, unflappable charm, a superb crooner, a gifted comedian, and the smoothest member of the legendary Rat Pack. A man who made everything he did look easy, and who seemed to embody the very ideal of relaxed, tuxedoed sophistication. His resting place here at Westwood is elegant in its simplicity, a marble crypt in the wall, and it is inscribed with the perfect farewell, the title of his signature song, "Everybody Loves Somebody Sometime," a line that captures both the romance of his music and the affection in which he is still so widely held. He made a career, and an art, of looking as though he had not a care in the world, the drink in one hand and the cigarette in the other, the tuxedo always immaculate, the smile always easy, and audiences adored him for the way he seemed to glide through life untroubled and amused. But that effortlessness was itself a kind of genius, for he was a superb singer with a warm and supple baritone, a naturally gifted comedian with impeccable timing, and a beloved television star whose relaxed charm filled living rooms for years. As a member of the legendary Rat Pack, he became a symbol of a whole glamorous era of nightclubs and neon and cool, and his signature songs remain as inviting today as ever. His resting place here at Westwood is understated and elegant, a simple crypt in the wall, and the words carved upon it, drawn from the song most closely associated with him, are the perfect farewell, romantic and warm and just a little melancholy, exactly like the man himself. He rests among his fellow legends in this little garden of stars. He was, famously, one half of one of the most successful comedy partnerships in show business before he ever became a solo star. And when that partnership ended, many doubted he could make it on his own, only to watch him become bigger than ever, a top recording artist, a beloved film actor, and the host of one of the most popular variety shows on television, all while seeming never to break a sweat. That relaxed, unbothered persona, the sense that he was letting the audience in on a private joke, was the heart of his enormous appeal, and it concealed a consummate professional who worked harder than he ever let anyone see. His signature songs, warm and romantic and touched with a gentle melancholy, remain staples of the American songbook, played at weddings and on late-night drives the world over. His elegant, understated crypt at Westwood, inscribed with the title of his most beloved song, is a fittingly cool and graceful resting place for a man who made looking effortless into a lasting art. There is something wonderfully appropriate in the quiet elegance of his resting place, for just as he never oversold a song or overplayed a joke, so his grave makes no grand statement, trusting, as he always did, that a little understatement is the surest sign of real class. Fans of that whole golden era of cool still seek it out, humming his songs. He rests here now, the king of cool, beloved by somebody still. Let us travel now, just steps away, to the grave of Billy Wilder, one of the greatest writers and directors in the history of the movies. Wilder was a titan of the cinema, the brilliant mind behind an astonishing run of masterpieces, from the shadowy Sunset Boulevard to the immortal comedy Some Like It Hot to the Oscar-sweeping The Apartment, films of such wit and craft that they place him among the very finest filmmakers who ever lived. And he brought that same legendary wit to his own headstone, which bears what may be the single greatest epitaph in all of Hollywood, a perfect final joke that reads, "I'm a writer, but then nobody's perfect," echoing the famous closing line of his most beloved comedy. It is impossible not to laugh, and to admire the man who was still writing perfect gags from beyond the grave. He had fled the horrors of Europe as a young man, and arrived in Hollywood barely speaking the language, and yet he went on to master the American idiom so completely that he became one of its greatest storytellers, a writer and director whose films combined a European's worldly wit with a showman's flawless sense of entertainment. Across an extraordinary career, he made comedies and dramas of equal brilliance, winning armfuls of Academy Awards and creating some of the most quoted and beloved movies ever made, pictures whose final lines have become part of the language. It was one of those very lines, the famously perfect closing joke of his most beloved comedy, that he chose, with characteristic wit, to echo upon his own gravestone, turning even his death into an occasion for the kind of impeccable gag that was his trademark. To find that epitaph among the quiet graves of Westwood is to laugh out loud and then to marvel, for it is exactly the sign-off one would wish for from so great a wit, proof that his timing never failed him. not even at the very end. His films are miracles of construction, their plots ticking along like fine watches, their dialogue crackling with a wit that never sacrifices heart, and they range across every mood, from savage satire to tender romance to the darkest of comedy, always with the same impeccable craftsmanship. He collected an astonishing number of Academy Awards across his career and mentored and inspired filmmakers who would themselves become legends. And yet he wore his genius lightly, forever ready with a quip and a sardonic observation about the business he both loved and skewered. It is entirely characteristic that he should have turned even his gravestone into a piece of writing, choosing an epitaph that doubles as a wink to every fan of his most beloved film, so that his last word to the world is a joke, and a perfect one. Visitors to Westwood who stumble upon it invariably laugh, and then fall quiet with admiration. For it is the ideal farewell from a man who understood, better than almost anyone, that the very best endings leave the audience smiling. He rests here now, the master of wit who got the last laugh. Let us travel now to the nearby resting place of Rodney Dangerfield, the beloved comedian who got no respect. Dangerfield was one of the most purely funny men who ever lived, a stand-up genius whose bulging eyes, tugging necktie, and endless litany of complaints that he got no respect made him a comedy institution adored by generations, a late-blooming star who became one of the most recognizable comics in America. And true to his craft, he made his own gravestone into one final joke. For the marker at his Westwood resting place bears the wonderfully self-deprecating epitaph, "There goes the neighborhood," a last punchline from a man who spent his whole life making the world laugh. Even here, in this hushed garden of stars, he refuses to take himself seriously, and visitors cannot help but grin. His was one of the great late-blooming success stories in the history of comedy, for he struggled for years, even leaving show business for a time to sell aluminum siding, before finding at last the persona that would make him a legend, the perpetually put upon everyman loosening his necktie and lamenting, in a torrent of perfectly crafted one-liners, that he simply got no respect. That character made him one of the most beloved and recognizable comedians in America, a fixture of late-night television and hit films, and a generous mentor who gave many younger comics their first big break. He fired off jokes at a machine-gun pace, each one landing, and audiences roared with a helpless, affectionate laughter. It is entirely in keeping with his whole comic identity that he made even his gravestone into a punchline, and the wonderfully self-mocking line carved upon his marker delivers one final laugh from a man who spent his life insisting, with a twinkle, that the world never gave him his due. Here, at last, the flowers and the visitors suggest otherwise. There was a warmth beneath the complaining that audiences felt instinctively, a sense that this rumpled, sweating, exasperated everyman was somehow on their side, giving voice to all the small indignities of ordinary life and turning them into joy, and that warmth made him not merely respected, but genuinely loved. He became a beloved figure across film and television, introducing wave after wave of young comedians at the club he ran and helping to launch some of the biggest careers in comedy, a generosity for which the whole profession remembers him fondly. He kept working and joking to the very end, irrepressible and self-deprecating as ever. And his gravestone delivers the last and best joke of all, its cheerfully insulting epitaph, a perfect final wink from a man who built an empire on the premise that the world never gave him his due. The steady stream of admirers who come to grin at it, leaving their own small tributes, is proof, if any were needed, that he had earned all the respect in the world. He rests here now, still cracking wise, and getting a little respect at last. Let us travel now to the grave of Merv Griffin, the talk show host and entertainment mogul who built an empire on fun. Griffin was a beloved television personality, the genial host of a hugely popular talk show, but his true genius lay behind the camera, for he created two of the most successful game shows in the history of television, beloved institutions that have entertained the world for decades and made him enormously wealthy. He kept his sense of humor to the very end, and his monument here at Westwood bears a gloriously fitting epitaph, one that could only belong to a man who spent his life on television, reading simply, "I will not be right back after this message." It is the perfect sign-off from a broadcasting legend, and it never fails to draw a smile from those who find it among the flowers. He began as a band singer and a genial television host, charming audiences for years as the affable master of a long-running talk show. But his real gift was for understanding what people wanted to watch, and he parlayed that instinct into one of the great fortunes in show business. The two game shows he created became beloved institutions, fixtures of the evening in millions of homes for decade after decade. Their theme, music, and formats woven into the fabric of popular culture around the world, and they made him not merely a star but a mogul. He was, by all accounts, a man of boundless energy and genuine charm, who loved the business he was in and never lost his sense of fun. And so it is perfectly fitting that his monument should carry so playful an epitaph, the ultimate broadcaster's sign-off, promising with a wink that this time he will not be returning after the commercial break. It draws a smile from everyone who discovers it, a last bit of showmanship from a man who spent his life keeping the whole world entertained and coming back for more. His creations became so woven into daily life that their sounds and images are recognized instantly by people who could not name their creator, a testament to how completely he understood the rhythms of home entertainment and the simple, enduring pleasure of playing along from the couch. He was a performer who became a mogul without ever losing the entertainer's instinct for delight, and the fortune he built allowed him to become a noted figure in business and philanthropy besides, though he never lost his showman's twinkle. His resting place at Westwood, marked with its perfectly chosen broadcaster's farewell, is a small delight for everyone who finds it, a last flash of the wit and warmth that made him a fixture of the American evening for so long. It is the kind of epitaph that makes a stranger laugh aloud among the quiet graves, and then feel, oddly, as though they have just been let in on a warm and gentle joke by an old friend signing off for the very last time. With a wink and a promise not quite kept, he rests here now, signed off at last, the showman who made the world play along. Let us travel now to the resting place of Jack Lemmon, one of the most beloved and versatile actors the movies ever knew. Lemmon was a treasure, an actor of extraordinary range who could break your heart in a searing drama and then reduce you to helpless laughter in a comedy, the star of masterpieces like The Apartment and Some Like It Hot and Days of Wine and Roses, and a two-time Academy Award winner adored by audiences and colleagues alike for his warmth and his consummate skill. His headstone here at Westwood is a stroke of quiet genius, understated and perfect, for it reads simply Jack Lemmon, and then beneath his name, the single word in, as though he is forever billed in one more picture, eternally starring in whatever comes next. He was perhaps the most relatable of all the great stars, an actor of such warmth and such quicksilver skill that he could make you feel he was an old friend, whether he was playing a hapless office worker, climbing the corporate ladder, a musician on the run in disguise, or a man drowning in his own troubles in one of the screen's most harrowing dramas. He moved between uproarious comedy and shattering tragedy with an ease that few actors have ever matched, twice winning the Academy Award and earning the deep affection of audiences and the profound respect of his peers across a career of half a century. He was known, too, as one of the kindest and most generous men in the business, beloved by everyone who worked with him. His headstone is a small masterpiece of understatement and wit, giving his name and then, simply, the word that would introduce him in the credits of a film, so that he seems billed for eternity in whatever role comes next, forever the star of the show. It is the perfect memorial for a consummate professional who made it all look effortless. He had a gift, rare among actors, for making his own struggles and anxieties so recognizable that audiences saw themselves in him. Whether he was flailing through comic misadventure or unraveling in quiet desperation, and that gift made him one of the most trusted and beloved performers of his time. An actor people felt they knew personally. He formed one of the great creative partnerships of the movies with a favorite director and a favorite co-star, returning to work with them again and again across the decades. And he approached every role, no matter how small, with the same generous, meticulous care. Those who worked with him spoke always of his decency and his humility, of a star who never behaved like one. His witty, understated headstone, presenting his name as though it were a film credit forever awaiting the next picture, is the perfect memorial for such a man, capturing in a single word the sense that he is merely between roles, ready to step back into the light, and it never fails to bring an affectionate smile to those who find it. He rests here now, Jack Lemmon, in the everyman we could not help but love. Let us travel now to the grave of Natalie Wood, a luminous star who was beloved from her earliest childhood. Wood was a rare talent who grew up on the screen, enchanting audiences as a little girl in Miracle on 34th Street, and maturing into one of the finest actresses of her generation. Unforgettable in Rebel Without a Cause, West Side Story, and Splendor in the Grass, a 3-time Oscar nominee of great beauty and greater depth. Her death by drowning at just 43 was a shocking tragedy that stunned the world and has never quite been laid to rest in the public imagination. She lies here at Westwood among so many of her peers, mourned and remembered, and her admirers still come to leave flowers for the gifted and lovely star who was taken far too soon. She was one of the very few child performers to make the difficult leap to enduring adult stardom. And she did it triumphantly, growing from the adorable little girl who believed in a department store Santa into one of the most gifted and luminous actresses of her generation. She brought a rare depth and vulnerability to her most famous roles, holding her own beside the most electric young actors of her day, and earning 3 Academy Award nominations before she was 30, a beloved star who seemed to embody a whole era of Hollywood glamour and promise. Her sudden death, by drowning during a weekend boating trip, sent a shock through the world that has never entirely faded. But it is not the mystery that draws her admirers here to Westwood. It is the love, the memory of the beautiful, warm, gifted woman whose films continue to enchant new audiences. They leave flowers for her among the crypts of her fellow legends, mourning a light that went out far too soon. From her earliest years, she carried herself with a poise and an emotional honesty that were extraordinary in one so young. And she matured into an actress of real courage, unafraid to explore complicated and troubled characters, bringing a trembling authenticity to stories of young love and heartbreak that still resonates powerfully with audiences today. She was, by every account, warm and generous and devoted to her family, a woman as beloved off the screen as on it, which made the shock of her sudden loss all the more painful for those who knew her and the millions who felt they did. In the years since, her early films have found new admirers with every generation, ensuring that she is remembered not for the sorrow of her ending, but for the light she brought to the screen. Her grave at Westwood, tended and adorned with flowers by those who cherish her memory, is a place of quiet affection, where admirers come to remember a genuine talent and a lovely spirit, gone far too soon but never, ever forgotten. She rests here now, the child star who became a legend, forever young. And so we come to the final grave of our long and glamorous journey, and it belongs, fittingly, to the most iconic figure the movies have ever produced, whose simple crypt is the most visited resting place in all of Hollywood. Let us travel to the wall crypt of Marilyn Monroe, the eternal goddess of the silver screen. Monroe was and remains the ultimate symbol of Hollywood glamour, a shimmering, vulnerable, luminous presence whose fame has only grown in the decades since her tragic death at just 36, until she has become something beyond a movie star, a myth, an icon recognized in every corner of the earth. And yet her resting place, a simple crypt in a modest wall here at Westwood, was intended to be private and unassuming, which only makes the devotion it draws the more astonishing. Her crypt front has been worn smooth and discolored by the countless kisses and touches of admirers, and for 20 years after her death, her heartbroken former husband, the baseball legend Joe DiMaggio, had fresh roses delivered to it several times every week. The man who first made her a national sensation later purchased the crypt beside her so as to spend eternity in her company. It is, in its very simplicity, the most stunning grave in all of Hollywood, for no monument of marble could ever equal the love that keeps it forever adorned. Hers is the most famous face in the history of the movies, and perhaps in the history of the world, a shimmering combination of glamour and comedy, and heartbreaking vulnerability that made her the definitive screen goddess and, in the decades since her death, something even larger, a universal symbol recognized instantly on every continent. She was a far finer and more intelligent actress than she was often given credit for, luminous in her great comedies and quietly devastating in her dramatic roles, and behind the dazzling public image was a woman of real depth and real fragility, whose early death only deepened the world's tender fascination with her. Her simple wall crypt was meant to grant her, at last, the privacy that fame had always denied her, but her legend would not allow it, and her resting place has become a shrine, its marble worn smooth by admirers' touches and kisses, adorned perpetually with flowers, drawing pilgrims from every corner of the earth. That the man who first made her famous chose to spend eternity beside her only completes the poignant romance of the place. In the years since her death, her image has, if anything, only grown more powerful, reproduced endlessly, instantly recognizable to people who have never seen a single one of her films, so that she has passed beyond stardom into something like myth, a shorthand for glamour and beauty, and a certain fragile, luminous sorrow. Her modest crypt, meant to give her peace at last, has instead become perhaps the most visited resting place in all the world, a pilgrimage site for admirers who arrive from every nation to leave flowers and kisses and whispered thanks. There could be no more fitting end to our tour than this. The simplest of graves made the most stunning of all by the sheer, undying devotion of a world that took her to its heart and has never let her go. Proof that in Hollywood, love truly is stronger than death. She rests here now, the eternal goddess, adored beyond death. And so, friends, our long and glamorous tour among these 30 stunning graves comes to its close. We have wandered the loveliest cemeteries in all of Hollywood, from the lush lawns of Hollywood Forever to the cathedral mausoleums of Forest Lawn, from the serenity of Holy Cross to this tiny, hidden garden of stars. And everywhere we have seen the same wonderful truth, that in this town of dreams, glamour, and love and legend do not end at the grave. We have stood before grand marble sarcophagi and humble plaques in the grass, before bronze statues and secret gardens, before crypts adorned with lipstick kisses and headstones bearing the wittiest of farewells. And in each of them we have felt the enduring devotion of a world that refuses to forget the men and women who filled its dreams with beauty and laughter, romance and wonder. That devotion is the true monument, the roses delivered for 20 years, the kisses that wear the marble smooth, the flowers that never cease, the fans who journey from across the earth simply to say thank you. These stunning graves are not places of sorrow but of celebration, shrines to lives that gave the world so much joy, and to a kind of stardom so bright that not even death can dim it. So the next time you find yourself in the city of the angels, seek out these beautiful places and walk among the immortals, and leave a flower if you like, and remember that the legends who lie here are, in the only way that truly matters, still very much alive, shining on in every film we love and every song we treasure. Thank you for walking this glamorous road with me, through the whole dazzling history of Hollywood written in bronze and marble and stone. Think, as we part, of all we have seen across these 2 evenings, 30 resting places as varied as the stars themselves, and yet bound together by a single thread. Whether the monument was a towering marble sarcophagus or a plain plaque in the grass, whether it bore a solemn line of Shakespeare or a comedian's final punchline, every one of these graves was, in the end, made beautiful by the same thing, by love, by the refusal of an adoring world to let these luminous lives fade into forgetting. That is the real treasure of these cemeteries, not the marble or the bronze, but the devotion that surrounds them, the flowers laid by strangers, the roses sent for 20 faithful years, the kisses that wear the stone smooth, the pilgrims who cross oceans simply to say thank you. Rest well, you shining ones, adored in your day and adored still. And until we walk together again, among the stars, good night.